The human sacrifice aspect is alive and well in our society, I think.
It really is. It's just dressed up in a different way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't a movie. That wasn't a character. That was a man who has sat inside the machine and watched it operate.
I've seen what they do. The ritualistic behaviors, the drugging, putting girls in the suitcases, dumping them in alleyways. It's horrifying. And it's all done under the protection of this is going to be paid off. There's another NDA. This is going to be, it's terrible.
And here's the part nobody is putting together. Because while the internet has spent years dissecting flight logs, depositions, and black books, Mel Gibson has been sitting in rooms with these people, watching their faces change.
I imagined that stuff. That couldn't be the reason for why so-and-so was acting like, could it? Mm-hmm. And then you find out later on the track that you are exactly on track. Mm-hmm. With a lot of this stuff, not specifically on track, but that you could, that some of your worst nightmares were real.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Because nobody, and I mean nobody, makes A-list celebrities sweat, squirm, go silent, or full-on breakdown like Mel Gibson. And the question isn't whether he's telling the truth. The question is, why do they keep reacting like he is? Let's start at the beginning. Because to understand why Mel Gibson makes powerful people nervous, you have to understand what they did to him first. In 2006, Mel Gibson was pulled over in Malibu. And within 48 hours, his name was radioactive. Every studio distanced itself. Every awards body pretended he didn't exist. The press was relentless. It was swift, it was coordinated, and it was thorough. Now, people accepted that story because the story they were given was easy to swallow. Man says something horrible, man gets canceled. Case closed. But here's what's interesting. The speed of it, the totality of it, the way an entire industry moved in a single synchronized direction, not just condemning him, but erasing him. Because the thing about Hollywood, and this is something people who've survived it keep trying to tell us, is that it doesn't operate on morality. It operates on leverage.
You know, I had a whole bunch of weird paranoid suspicions about what the hell was going on because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
He wasn't coming in guns blazing. He was genuinely confused, like someone who walked into a party and slowly realized something was deeply wrong with everyone in the room. And he described it in a way that is almost too specific to be random.
The whole place can't be like, Weird Town, where the stranger wanders in and all the people are in the bar and they all shut up when he looks at them and they tell you don't go into the house on the hill. And it's like that.
He said he walked away from those early years convincing himself he was paranoid, telling himself he'd imagined it. Surely, an entire industry couldn't operate that way. And then years later, the receipts started coming out. And what did he find out? That he wasn't wrong. He wasn't paranoid. He was just early. And the industry knew that, which is why they buried him before he could speak. Because the most dangerous person in any corrupt system isn't the one who knows the most. It's the one who's willing to say it. Now, here's where the story stops being just about Mel Gibson and becomes about something much, much bigger. In February 2026, Attorney General Pam Bondi submitted a document to Congress. Over 300 names, people allegedly connected to Jeffrey Epstein's network. 300. And the moment that list started circulating, something fascinating happened. Something that tells you everything you need to know about how this industry works. The biggest names on that list didn't call lawyers and go on offense. They didn't hold press conferences. They didn't sue anyone for defamation. They went quiet, complete, total silence. And if you've spent any time studying how powerful people respond to accusations, you know that silence isn't always innocence. Sometimes, silence is the most strategic move on the board, because the moment you engage, you confirm that the conversation is worth having. But Mel Gibson, he's been having this conversation for decades.
The whole situation, so when you read it, it's a pretty convincing document. And you're right, nobody sued him for it.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
Well, not only did they not sue him, their response is to try to ignore it. They don't want to debate him on it. They don't want to do anything.
No.
They want to just ignore it and hope it goes away. But it doesn't go away. And the more people talk about it, the more people read it. And when you do read it and you go, if this is true, what the is going on? And how is that monster still loose?
He's right, it doesn't go away, because 3 million files don't lie. Flight manifests don't lie. Depositions don't lie. And the names inside those documents, names that span music, film, tech, and politics, are now permanently attached to one of the most grotesque criminal enterprises in modern American history. And yet, here's the part that should make every single person watching this uncomfortable. Not a single additional arrest has been made. Not one. Epstein is dead allegedly. Maxwell is in what amounts to a luxury arrangement. And the 300 names on that list are still attending galas, still dropping albums, still accepting accepting awards, still sitting across from interviewers who will never, ever ask the real questions. But Mel Gibson will. Was she asking for help? And did anyone answer? Let's talk about one of the most loaded threads in this entire story, because this one doesn't just involve power and money, it involves a woman that millions of people have worshipped for over 2 decades. Jay-Z's name appeared in the Epstein files, on the 300-name list submitted to Congress, in Epstein's Black Book, his personal contact directory, and in documents recovered during searches of Epstein's properties. Now, the official flight manifests don't place him at the island. There's no verified evidence that Jay-Z visited Epstein's properties in New Mexico, Florida, or the Caribbean. So let's be clear about that distinction up front, because this story isn't really about what Jay-Z did or didn't do at those locations. It's about the company he kept, and what that company may have cost the woman standing next to him. Because here's Mel Gibson's framework. This idea of Hollywood as a system of control, of grooming, of using proximity to power to trap people becomes impossible to ignore.
Why did God give me this life? Sometimes it's overwhelming. Why did God give me my talent, my gift, my family? But I know you're not supposed to question God. So I'm grateful for the life He's given me. I'm so grateful. I'm alive and I'm living a dream.
Now, some people hear that and they hear a woman expressing gratitude. Mel Gibson's camp hears something else entirely. They hear a woman who has been inside a system since she was a teenager, who met Jay-Z when she was 16 years old, whose entire identity, her image, her music, her public persona has been shaped and reshaped by people with financial stakes in her output. And the theory that's been circulating, the one Gibson's name keeps getting attached to, is that what looks like a love story from the outside might have an entirely different architecture on the inside. Maya, the artist who worked directly with Roc Nation, said something that stopped a lot of people cold.
Even when I met Jay-Z and I signed to Roc Nation, the first thing he told me to do is get plastic surgery. I'm not insecure because I would have got plastic surgery.
The first thing, not let's talk about your sound, not let's develop your brand. The first thing. And Maya made a broader point that's worth sitting with. She said, look around. Look at every woman in that orbit. Every single one has been surgically altered. Every single one has been physically transformed to fit a standard that someone else decided. That's not a compliment. That's a blueprint. And when you layer Mel Gibson's framework on top of that, his argument that this industry uses mind control, uses dependency, uses carefully constructed public personas to keep people performing rather than living, the picture gets uncomfortable very quickly. Because here's what Gibson's argument actually is. When you strip away the more extreme language, powerful men in this industry identified talented women early, built relationships with them before those women had the tools to evaluate what was being offered, engineered those relationships to create financial, emotional, and reputational dependency. And then once the dependency was established, those women became assets, not people, assets. And Beyoncé, one of the most powerful, most celebrated, most visible women on the planet, has been inside that architecture since she was a child. Whether she knows it, whether she chose it, whether she's complicit or captive, those are questions that nobody with a mainstream platform will ask. But Mel Gibson is asking them, and that is why he makes people cry. All right, let's move to someone where the evidence isn't theoretical, where it isn't name-dropping, where it isn't flight manifests that need interpretation. Let's talk about Naomi Campbell, because this is where Gibson's argument goes from controversial to documented. Naomi Campbell's name appears on multiple verified flight records from the early 2000s. Not one, multiple. The October 2002 manifest places her on a flight with Ghislaine Maxwell, and photographs recovered during investigations appear to confirm her presence on a yacht with Maxwell and victims. That's not conjecture. That's photographic evidence corroborated by flight records.
How many people do you think you have rubbed shoulders with, as the Mail on Sunday put it?
I've rubbed shoulders with hundreds of thousands of people.
Hundreds of thousands of people. That's the answer. That's what you say when the question is about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and a yacht in Saint-Tropez. Hundreds of thousands of people. Virginia Giuffre testified in her 2016 deposition that she met Naomi Campbell at multiple locations, including a birthday party on a yacht in the south of France. She described Naomi as a friend of Ghislaine's, and she alleged that Naomi was not warm toward her during their encounters, which, if you understand the dynamics of Epstein's world, carries a very specific implication. Because in Epstein's ecosystem, the women who were established, the ones with careers, with power, with public profiles, served a very different function than the young women being recruited. And the hostility that Giuffre described isn't incidental, it's structural. Here's the part that Mel Gibson keeps hammering. Epstein's genius, if you can call it that, was understanding that celebrity association was more valuable than money. Because money can be traced, money can be audited, money leaves records. But a supermodel who shows up at your party, that's social proof. That's the signal that says this man is legitimate. This man has access. This man can do what he says he can do. And Naomi Campbell was one of the most famous women in the world. Her presence on a flight, on a yacht, at a dinner didn't just make Epstein look connected. It made him look safe. It made him look like someone that young, ambitious women could trust. And that's what makes this so much darker than just a list of names on a flight manifest. Because those names weren't just passengers. They were currency. Now let's talk about the tier of this network that operated completely differently. Because not everyone in Epstein's orbit was there for glamour or social access. Some people were there because Epstein had something on them.
No, it's actually true that I was only at dinners. I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
Only dinners, never the island, never met any women. Here's what the files actually say. Bill Gates first met Jeffrey Epstein in 2011, not 2001, not 1998, 2011. 3 years later, Epstein had already been convicted of solicitation in Florida. 3 years after the world knew officially, legally, on the record what kind of man Jeffrey Epstein was. And yet, one of the wealthiest, most scrutinized philanthropists in human history decided that was a good time to start having dinners with him. Why? The files suggest a very specific answer. A woman named Mila Antonova, a Russian woman who had been in a relationship with Gates in 2010. Epstein learned about the relationship, and rather than simply hold that information over Gates's head, which would be crude, Epstein played a longer, more sophisticated game. He helped Antonova, paid for her coding education, inserted himself into her professional life, built up a financial relationship with her that he could later use as leverage against Gates. And when Gates refused to cooperate with Epstein's donor-advised fund schemes in 2017, Epstein sent him a message. Reimburse me for her tuition. Or I tell everyone about the affair. That's not a networking relationship. That's a trap.
Yeah, as I said, it's not one thing. It was many things. But I did not like that he'd had meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, no.
Many things. She said many things. Not, I found out he had meetings and I was upset. Many things. The meetings with Epstein were just one item on a list long enough to end a 27-year marriage. And what Mel Gibson's argument forces you to confront is this. The Bill Gates story isn't about whether he's a good person or a bad person. It's about how the Epstein machine operated at the highest levels of global influence. Epstein wasn't just collecting celebrities. He was collecting power. And when he couldn't buy someone's cooperation, he manufactured leverage to force it. And that is the part that nobody wants to say out loud. DiCaprio's name was a weapon. That's different. Now I need to slow down for a second, because this is where the story gets nuanced, and nuance matters, especially when names are being thrown around and careers are on the line. Not everyone in the Epstein files is there for the same reason. Mel Gibson makes this distinction, and it's actually one of the more intellectually honest parts of his entire argument. There are people in those files because Epstein used their names not because those people were involved. Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Blanchett, Bruce Willis, Cameron Diaz. Their names appear in a 2016 deposition because a young woman named Johanna Schoberg described Epstein being on the phone constantly claiming to be speaking to these actors while she was performing massages for him. She called it name-dropping and flimsy braggadocio. Think about that for a second. You're a young woman. You've been recruited into this world, and while you're there, the man keeps casually dropping, "Oh, I'm just on the phone with Leo. Oh, that was Kate Blanchett. Oh, Bruce Willis is coming next week." That's different from Jay-Z's name appearing in a personal black book and on a 300-person congressional list. The tiers matter. Gibson's point is that the system created multiple levels of involvement. Some people were tools, some were participants, and some were targets. And conflating all of them into one undifferentiated mass of guilt actually helps the people who were most deeply involved, because it allows them to hide behind the noise.
What the is going on? And how is that monster still loose?
That's the question. That's always been the question. How is anyone still loose? And maybe, just maybe, the answer is that the people with the power to answer that question are the same people whose names are in the files. Peter Listerman, described in the files as a model matchmaker, was a primary FBI person of interest specifically for his role in recruiting young women from Eastern Europe and Russia. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't a wealthy man with poor judgment about who he spent time with. This was a business with a logistics department, a finance department, a human resources pipeline, and a marketing strategy built entirely around the names of people who either didn't know they were being used or did know and said nothing.
Most of these girls,
They get moved around and touched around very early on. And, you know, and the people that have control of everything are untouchable.
Untouchable. Because when your logistics coordinator is someone nobody has ever heard of, but your social calendar includes supermodels and tech billionaires and former presidents, you become untouchable by association. You're not a criminal, you're an ecosystem. And ecosystems don't get arrested, they get managed. Let's talk about the movie that the industry did not want made. Then came Sound of Freedom, produced by Gibson, directed by, and starring Jim Caviezel, the man who played Jesus in Gibson's film. Two men who had been, by all accounts, marked by the industry. The film cost $14.5 million. It made $250 million on a story about child trafficking, about fake modeling scouts, about vulnerable families being deceived by people who promise their children a future in the entertainment industry. Far worse. And now we know exactly what that means. Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel didn't make a movie about child. They made a documentary about Jeffrey Epstein's recruitment pipeline 2 years before the files were released. And the industry buried it until the audience refused to let it be buried. Before Mel Gibson, before the files, before Sound of Freedom and Joe Rogan and the 300-name list, there was Corey Feldman, sitting in front of cameras, saying exactly what needed to be said.
Told the police. In fact, if anybody wants to go back to 1993, when I was interviewed by the Santa Barbara Police Department, I sat there and I gave them the names. They're on record. They have all of this information.
1993. The Santa Barbara Police Department has a recorded interview with names from a child actor who experienced abuse firsthand. That interview sat in a file for decades. And this is what Mel Gibson is really talking about when he talks about the system. He's not just talking about bad people doing bad things. He's talking about the infrastructure, the official, institutional infrastructure that chose not to act. Because when a child gives names to law enforcement and law enforcement does nothing, that's not a failure of the system. That is the system working exactly as designed.
I'm saying that there are people that were the people that did this to both me and Corey that are still working, they're still out there, and they're some of the richest, most powerful people in this business.
And they are.
And they do not want me saying what I'm saying right now.
Are you saying that they're pedophiles?
Yes.
And that they're still in this business?
He said yes, flatly, simply, without drama. Yes. And what happened to Corey Feldman after he said yes? The same thing that happened to Mel Gibson. The same thing that happens to everyone who steps out of line in this particular industry. It looks like award shows and charity events and carefully curated Instagram posts reminding you what good people these celebrities are. It looks like performance.
You believe that there are big realms of good and evil, and they're slugging it out.
What does the evil side want?
Oh, it wants you. It wants you. People are capable of horrors, of atrocities. We're also capable of wonderful things, of good things. And we have the choice.
And we have the choice. That's the part that gets lost in all of this, because it's easy to look at a list of 300 names and feel powerless. It's easy to look at 3 million files and feel like the corruption is so total, so systemic, so deeply embedded in the institutions we've trusted that nothing can be done. Cat Williams said it. Jaguar Wright said it. Mel Gibson said it. Here's the thing about whistleblowers. They don't come out of nowhere. Cat Williams sat down and said it. Jaguar Wright said it. Corey Feldman said it in 1993. Various people from inside the industry, people who had careers, people who had everything to lose, kept saying the same thing in different ways across different decades. And every single one of them was treated the same way. First, they're ignored. The story doesn't get picked up. The mainstream outlets don't touch it. Then, if they get loud enough to be impossible to ignore, they're discredited. Old photos surface. Old lawsuits get revisited. Former associates suddenly have things to say about their character. And then, if they're still standing, they get replaced. The conversation moves on. The public's attention shifts. And the person who is saying uncomfortable things gets repositioned as a footnote. A cautionary tale about what happens when you let your ego get ahead of your judgment. This is the machine. This is how it works. And what makes Mel Gibson different from all the others, what makes him uniquely capable of making celebrities react, is that he went through the machine himself. He was put through the full process. The incident, the coverage, the banishment, the years in the wilderness, and he survived it. He's not speaking from the outside looking in, he's speaking from the other side as someone who was ground up by the machinery and came out the other end not destroyed, not silenced, not neutralized, but angrier, clearer, more certain. And that's terrifying to people who've spent their careers believing that the machine is invincible. Because if Mel Gibson can survive it, who else can? There's a dimension of Mel Gibson's worldview that a lot of people dismiss because it sounds old-fashioned, or naive, or depending on your perspective, dangerously religious. He talks about good and evil, literally, not metaphorically, not as a rhetorical device.
You believe that there are big realms of good and evil, and they're slugging it out.
And then he said something that I think is the most important thing he's ever said publicly.
Every morning when I wake up,
I actually pray that I don't deceive myself.
Every morning, he prays not to deceive himself, not the world, not the interviewer, not the audience, himself. And Mel Gibson, whatever else you think of him, whatever complications he carries, whatever controversies have attached themselves to his name, wakes up every morning asking himself not to do that. Somebody in a very expensive house in a very good neighborhood with a very well-paid PR team reacts in a way that tells you the story isn't over. Because you don't cry about accusations that don't touch you. You don't go silent about rumors that aren't real. You don't deploy the entire apparatus of celebrity image management against one man's voice unless that voice is saying something true.
And the more people talk about it, the more people read it. And when you do read it, you go, if this is true, what the is going on?
If this is true, and every day more of it is confirmed. More flight records, more depositions, more emails, more names. And here he is, still talking, still making people cry. So what do you think? Is Mel Gibson the last honest man in Hollywood? Or is this something more complicated than that? Drop everything you're thinking in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't, because this story is not over, not even close, and share this with someone who needs to see it.